Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it's early morning, Saturday. What is the date today? 22nd of June. I've got coffee. I've not prettied myself. I still have like pillow marks on my face. But what I wanted to show you guys today, what I wanted to talk about in today's episode. By the way, let me look at YouTube channel. I don't even know what episode I'm on. I think it's episode 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so this is episode 5 of Diary of an Indie Game Dev. And I need more coffee. What are we going to talk about today? Today we're going to talk about the realities of working from home, the realities of working remote. Because a lot of what we've been talking about is remote studios and working remotely. Coffee. I think I'm going to have to graduate and get like a little tripod for this thing, because I haven't yet found a good way to record these videos. We still have other gear. I mean, I could be recording it on our camera, but I'm just lazy. Anyway, let me get comfortable, and we're going to talk about challenges of working from home, working remote, because that does apply to a lot of different businesses, not just, what we've been building in our game studio. So one of the things that stands out to me most is I had a meeting. This has been years ago. When we first started this project in 2014, I was living in Playa del Carmen with my wife, and we were helping a friend of mine on one of his projects. It's actually, at the time, he wasn't really a friend. He was sort of a friend, but he was becoming a friend. My wife and I had ran a series of 3 weekend workshops on social media and digital marketing for a company down there who had contracted us to come in and do the shows. I want to say it was co-working Playa del Carmen. It was a big co-working facility, and they had found out about our presentations and asked us to come down and teach. So met this guy and his girlfriend they were there at the workshop, and then they hired us for a private consultation after. And then during the course of the consultation, he wanted to pay me for my time, and I was actually like, well, actually I'm really interested in your project and your product, so just make me a 30% partner and I'll come on board. So that's what I did, and I spent like a year working with them on their project. And I remember at one point we were probably 60% of the way done working on it, and it was summertime, and we had gone over to have a barbecue, and he asked me this question. He's like, how do you stay motivated? Like, how do you get up at 6 o'clock every day and do what you do? And I'd never thought about it like that before. I was like, well, that's actually a really good question. And I think that when you start looking at it from that perspective, it's just a matter of, finding what motivates you. If you're not having fun on whatever it is that you're working on, you're going to have a really hard time of making it work. It's any project. With this particular project, we're all building a video game. So it's something that all of us have wanted to do, and all of us, for various reasons or another, didn't take the career path that put us in game development. We're all in our late 30s. So when we were in our late teens, going into college, early 20s, game development was not what it is today. So if you think about it, that was back in like 1999, 2000. So game development was very niche. MMORPGs were just getting started, just releasing. Like EverQuest was just coming out, UO was just coming out, and it wasn't accessible where it was today. You know, yeah, there was the PlayStation and Nintendo and stuff, but it wasn't the mass thing it is today. There weren't all these indie studios and everything else. There was only big companies, you know, like BioWare. And if you wanted to get in at BioWare, you had to live in a city where BioWare had a studio, which was, I want to say Montreal at the time. I don't remember exactly. But they didn't have, you know, it wasn't this thing where these video game companies had 5 or 6 studios spread around the world. They had, you know, one major studio where their headquarters were, and if you wanted to get into their company, you had to live there, and that just wasn't feasible for a lot of people. You know, it wasn't accessible like it was today. So flash forward to where we are today, and even, I mean, it's even more accessible now than it was, you know, 5 years ago when we started this project. But the reality is that all of us who are on this team, you know, had day jobs in other fields, and this has always been something where we always wanted to do it, but just life had taken us in other directions. So for us working on this project day in and day out, there are challenges, yes, but for the most part, everyone wants to be here. We've talked a little bit, I think, in one of the previous episodes about the sacrifice required in terms of, you know, if you're really going to pursue this as a passion and make it successful, it can't be just a hobby. It has to be something that you're serious about, and that means, you know, working day in and day out. And sometimes that means you're going to be sacrificing time with friends, time with family, time with kids, time with significant others, so on and so forth. Because if this is what you want to do, then your motivation is what gets you up at 6 in the morning and keeps you going. Because working for yourself is extremely challenging. I want to say that at one point in time, when I was running workshops back in the day, 2014, 2015, I can't remember exactly, so this is off the top of my head from several years ago. There was an article that came out and talked about how Gordon Ramsay's show, I think it was called Hell's Kitchen, something like that. It was the show where he goes in and fixes up restaurants and gives people some good advice, but it's hard love, in his over-the-top TV personality way. But they were looking at how it was something like 65% of his 65% of the restaurant owners that he helped out on the show, within like a year or two after his appearance in their restaurant, you know, within a year or two, they were back to failing the same as before or worse than before, or had closed. And so somebody said, does that mean that he only has a 35% success rate, or does that mean that he has a 65% failure rate? And critics are always going to say, well, it's, you know, a 65% failure rate. I know from our own workshops, the reason that had become so pertinent to me was that in the course of running workshops and putting, I don't know, we probably did 40, 50 people, 50 people and businesses came through our workshops over the course of like 2 years. They were very exclusive. We did these 3-month, we called them brand boot camps. So people would come down to Cancun where we lived, and we would basically have I'm going to call this a weird word, we had a compound, but we would rent like a big house, with 5, 6 rooms. And so you've got 5, 6 people all living together over the course of 3 months. And every night we would have brand building, social media, digital marketing classes. Every morning my wife would teach Spanish, and then we would have a big adventure tour sometime around the end for like a graduation present. Anyway, we ran a bunch of people through. We also taught a bunch of private workshops and stuff around the Riviera Maya for hotels and the like, and the co-working facility that we mentioned. And my own rates were not that different than Gordon Ramsay's. I think ours were about 75%, like 73, 74% failure and 25%, 27% success. And when I started digging into, further research beyond that, I found that those numbers were pretty accurate. Like around 30% is the average of people who will actively, successfully complete whatever it is that they set out to do on their own. The other 70% will inherently fail. And the reason for that is because humans as a species are more of a pack mentality. This is going back to genetics and just who we are as a species. So this is scientific in nature. The alpha personality, and it doesn't have to be an alpha male, it could be an alpha female, but that alpha personality is fairly rare. So when you talk about that 30% success rate, you're looking at a success rate within a very small group of select individuals who think that they're cut out to be the alpha individual. People who have an idea, who have a kernel of something that they want to turn into a dream job. Whereas there are still hundreds of millions and billions of people out there who will never ever have that spark. They're more than content to be the cashier at a department store, or a clerk, an attendant, a secretary, an assistant. The spark that drives people to want to become an entrepreneur is not that common. And out of those people who do have the spark of entrepreneurship, only about 30% of people will make it. And that has nothing to do with the quality of the teacher. There's never going to be a 100% success rate when you're teaching people, because 70% of people are always going to fail. And that's a harsh reality to face. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which is what I kind of wanted to talk about in today's episode. In terms of working from home, working remote, how to stay self-motivated. So going back to that original concept, finding your motivation is very, very important. More important than anything else. But I think the next challenge that comes is being your own boss. Something we've seen a lot in all of our workshop graduates back in the day, and just general, being a public speaker at conventions and conferences over the past 6 years or so. People tend to lose speed very quickly. They go into things with big hopes, big dreams, and think that it's going to be easy peasy, and they've got this one of a million idea, and that it's just going to work out. And then they get 3 months into it, and it's like, well, shit, I'm working for free. I'm not making any money. I'm spending money constantly, but I'm not making any. I'm putting in all these hours, and I'm not seeing any rewards. This sucks. And a lot of people will break off at the 3-month point. Some people will make it to the 6-month point, but it's usually around the 6-month point that the vast majority of people will just drop off. There are a select few who will make it to 1 year, but there are very few who go beyond the 1 year point, because after 1 year, if people aren't seeing the success that they want to see, most people were like, well, this sucks, I'm not going to do this anymore. The reality is, for almost any type of business, unless you're extremely lucky and you hit a home run, you're not going to see any significant ROI within the first year. It's going to be 2 to 3 years of brand building before you get to the point where you're generating any type of significant income. And depending on how much money you've put into the company by that point, you might not be breaking even until year 5, year 6, year 7. And if you look at the way traditional businesses work, in terms of like a restaurant or getting a loan from a bank, when you start looking at the way classic corporate structure works, a general VC, venture capitalist, angel investors, so on and so forth, people who invest in businesses are generally not looking at the short term. They're looking at, am I going to make money in 5 to 7 years in this company? And then there's other, like Warren Buffett talks about the long run a lot of times. So you've got some people who are looking at, the 5 to 7 year break even point. And then you have other investors who are looking at the 7 to 10 year break even point. So think about that for a minute. 5 to 7 years minimum break even, 7 to 10 years for a select group of businesses. So 7 years is about the average of what it's going to be to break even on any given business. So knowing that, this is the reason why there's a 70% failure rate between people who try to become an entrepreneur and work for themselves and have a business and a brand, is because 70% of people just can't find the will to go beyond that 1 year point. You're asking people to make a 7-year commitment. That's not something most people are willing to do. And there are a million reasons why they aren't ready to make that commitment. It can be financial. It can be, their life changes. I can give you a good example of this on our project. We've had 2 people on the team who have had 2 kids each during the course of this project. We're 5 years in. We've had one person on the team who has gone through 2, if not 3, significant others. Another person on the team has gone through 1 big breakup. People have lives, and life circumstances change things for you. Looking at looking at kids entering into the picture, having kids changes everything. Your priorities change, your responsibilities change, your financial responsibilities change. And so working from home and finding time to work on a project like this is very difficult when you're helping a significant other raise children. Your priorities have shifted because now the kids are more important than the project. Not a bad thing, by the way. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm talking about realities of the project, realities of working from home. So when you start to look at the scope of 7 years as an average, it's normal that people's lives go through many ups and downs through that period. The initial 6-month period is that honeymoon period, and everyone's got passion for the project, and their lives are what they are at the beginning. But then 3 years in, are everybody's lives still in the same place they were when you started the project? The answer to that is probably not. So you have to be able to factor that type of stuff in, working on a project of this size and scope. That might sound like it's a little bit off topic, but it does pertain, because we're talking about, finding that motivation to stay in that grind in the trenches for 7 years, day in and day out. So number one, you have to be motivated. You have to have that motivation for your project. And it is a challenge when you have all these other factors hitting you from all corners. The other one I think that's a big challenge for people is when you work from home, it's very easy to get distracted. And Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, any social media platform, these are huge distractions when you're working from home, because it's very easy, and I'm just as guilty of it as anybody else, it's very easy to find yourself, I'm just going to take a 5-minute break, and I'm going to jump on social media, and I'm going to browse. And the next thing you know, 45 minutes have gone by. if you don't pay attention to that kind of stuff, and then there are various ways around this. I mean, you can set timers. I know friends of mine will actually actively not open any browsers when they're working on the project because it's just a distraction. So if they're writing or they're working on code or something, the phone goes into silent mode, do not disturb mode, everything gets shut down, and you're only working on what you need to be working on for that time period, because otherwise it's very easy to find yourself, jumping around and doing other things. And the other thing to think about is going back to the, humans are social creatures. Humans are pack animals, like many other animals on the planet. It's very important that you maintain social interaction. And that can be a challenge when you're working from home, because it's very easy to get into a bubble where, well, I don't need to leave the house. I've go grocery shopping and go to the gym, or, do whatever it is you're going to do, and that's it. And I think if you play video games, in particular, if you play mmorpgs, it is easy to keep a social circle going, because you can hop on and play. I mean, I literally have friends that I've been playing games with for a decade now, and I meet up with them 3 or 4 times a week. Some of them I've met in person, some of them I've never met in person. But even within our own team, this is something that's very important, working on a remote team. We try very hard to do things together online, apart from working, so that we can have camaraderie and friendship, and not just always be working together. So we do our gaming events. We have our gaming community where we play with our community of people over at Saga of Lucimia, but we also have multiple devs that jump in, and it's different every time. Not everyone likes the same games, not everyone has free time on the same nights, so it kind of varies who's going to be jumping in there and playing together. But then we also have our annual get-togethers where we all go somewhere for a week, and we have like a week-long vacation where we hang out. We bring, everybody's welcome to bring their spouses and kids, significant others. We've been doing that every year since we started this project. So, that's very important for us. And if you look at companies like, say, Obsidian, who has they have a studio, obviously, a physical studio, and, they play D&D together. They do lots of different things together as a team, apart from just work together. And that's very important when you're working remotely, is to find time to do that. So, whatever it is that floats your boat, Roll20 makes it really easy to play D&D together. We've done that a few times. There's lots of video games that you can play together. There's just lots of different things you can do as a team to keep yourselves friends, as opposed to only coworkers. And I think that that's very, very, very important to helping you continually stay motivated on a project of this scope, is to, not just work with the people who are your coworkers and partners, but also play with them. And have fun with them and get to know them. Don't just be a coworker. Know who they are, their friends, their family. Know their kids, know their dogs. It's very important to have that social interaction if you're going to be working from home. But yeah, getting up early. I don't always get up early. I do most days. Yesterday was an exception. Like yesterday, I slept in until almost 8 o'clock. Most days I'm up at 6, and I've been doing that for a long time, since I started this career. So it's been over a decade now. I just get up at 6, and I do have an alarm. But even when I don't have an alarm, like today, it's a Saturday, I didn't set an alarm today, and I was still up at 6:45, out here making coffee. So it's just, your body gets used to it. But I also don't stay up until, 2 o'clock in the morning. We have people on our team who are like that, who, they'll work till 3, 4 in the morning and then sleep till 11 o'clock or noon. And everybody's schedule is different, but I'm a big fan of the morning hours. I like that peaceful tranquility. So right now, for example, it's about 8:20, and my wife's pouring coffee in the kitchen. I can hear her, so she's getting up and around right now. And the thing for me is that if I get up at 6, I've got an hour and a half usually, sometimes 2 hours. It depends on the day, but I've at least got an hour and a half to 2 hour stretch where it's just me. And I can get the bulk of my most important work out of the way during that early morning chunk, because there's no traffic, there's no background noises, there's no distractions. It's just me and the computers and just getting my work done. And it's different for everybody. Some people have offices at home where they just shut the door, and when I'm in the office, leave me alone. Mine's a little more different. I mean, I've showed people before. I mean, I'm here in the living room. I'm not going to show you the living room right now because it's a little mess, because we've been reorganizing and doing some house cleaning, so we've got stuff piled everywhere. The point is, I work in my living room, and it's not efficient for people if you've got kids and stuff, because they're always going to be like, oh, mom's working on the computer, dad's working on the computer, and kids won't understand that you're busy and that you're working. So if you have a home office, it can be a little easier because you can shut the door. But this goes back to the Facebook thing, keeping your distractions to a minimum when you need to do your work. But it's also important, if you do have family commitments, you have to figure out a time where you can work uninterrupted. And the family has to understand that. It's a job like any other job. Just because I'm working from home doesn't mean that I'm not at work. So it needs to be that same situation where when I'm at work, unless it's an emergency, don't bother me. You wouldn't call me if I was in an office setting. You wouldn't be coming to me asking me to make you a sandwich or whatever the case may be. I'm using that. It might sound cold, but that's just the reality of it. If I was at an office setting, I wouldn't be accessible. So if I'm at home and these are my working hours, I'm not accessible during those working hours. Those are my working hours. But obviously, when you're working from home, you have the flexibility of dictating when those working hours happen. So that's the other really cool part of working from home, is that you get a lot more time to spend with your loved ones and do things. So I mean, I put in a good 10, 12 hours a day on this project, but I still spend time with my wife every day for the rest of that time, and we do lots of stuff together. We usually go out every single day for a walk. We usually watch a show together or a movie together every day. We'll go to the market. We do all our grocery shopping together. We cook together. All that stuff happens together, and that's very important to keep that work-life balance balanced. So working from home does have its challenges, but it also has a lot of benefits. You get to set your own schedule, more time with your loved ones. I do have the flexibility to take a day off when I want to and say, well, I don't really feel like working today unless I have a deadline. But, if I don't feel like working today and it's a Wednesday, that's fine. I'll push the work off till Saturday. It just means that on Saturday I need to make it up. And that's another area of failure for a lot of people, is then they just won't go back and make it up. And then one day turns into 2 days and 3 days and 4 days, and suddenly they're 2 weeks behind schedule. That's not good. Working remotely. What else can I think of as I wrap up this video? Communication with the team is very important. We've talked a little bit about this in past episodes. Because you're not working in the same space, it is important to have some sort of communication with your team members. So we use Slack. We also use Discord, and we have Hangouts, which are going away at some point for our team meetings. But everybody's on call basically all day. So using Slack, it's very easy to stay in communication with everybody on a day-to-day basis. One of the big ones for people is email. We have some people on the team who take days, several days to get back to emails, and that's something that's really you got to work on with people, and that can be a challenge because not everybody checks their emails consistently. I'm one of those people who, just because I've been making a living as a freelancer for 20 some years now, I know that communication is very important to getting work. So I just got in the habit years ago of, you don't let people go to voicemail if you can avoid it. You just answer the phone. And that goes for emails too, If an email comes in, get it replied to, get on about your day. So those are some quick things to think about if you're working remote. Keep the communication up. Use Slack and other means of daily communication. Keep your distractions to a minimum. Set work schedule. Find your motivation. And understand that this is a long-term commitment. It's not a 6-month honeymoon. It's a 7-year commitment as a general rule in terms of timelines. So hopefully you guys found some nuggets of wisdom in this. Don't forget to watch the previous 4 episodes. And I'll come back to you in episode 6 with something else. I don't know what yet.